In 2012, one of the biggest game developers in the world, Rockstar Games, coming fresh off of games like Red Dead Redemption and LA Noire, had come out with a continuation of the first two Max Payne games and making a Max Payne 3. The first two games made by Remedy Entertainment had come along and created a cult fan base with some of the most beloved third-person shooters of all time. Rockstar had a lot of hype to live up to try to compete with the first two games, but it's Rockstar Games, so we already knew that they were capable of making a good game. And when Max Payne 3 came out, it was so close to being an amazing game, but it fell just short. After Rockstar taking over the reins for Remedy Entertainment and deciding that they wanted to do things a little bit differently for Max Payne 3 than Remedy had done for the first two Max Payne games, their approach was very, very different. The first two games were a noir, hyper-stylized kind of game, and Rockstar wanted to make something much more gritty and realistic, and while the first two games were dark, they wanted Max Payne 3 to be much darker and dirtier because Max is kind of always covered in shit. Anybody who remembers this game being made at the time will remember one thing in specific, and that is how long it actually took this game to come out. This game was in development for a long time, constantly being reworked and the direction being changed, and you have to wonder if that's because of Rockstar's extremely high standards that they've set for themselves and their meticulous attention to detail, or if it's just because they couldn't get the game quite how they wanted it. But with the game being in development for a long time and the direction being changed over and over again and the game getting delayed and delayed, time and time again, that just ends up spelling trouble. Another interesting thing was their decision to move on to Rockstar's engine called the Rage engine, which allowed for all kinds of shit, the better graphics, the environmental destruction, of these fluid animations, more dynamic camera angles, improved physics. It just made the game bigger and more seamless and much more modern than the first two games were at the time, because the first two games, if you go back and play them now, modern is definitely not the word that I would use to describe them. They are great games, and for the time they were absolutely amazing, but now they're a little outdated, I guess you could say. Now, if there's one thing you know about me, if you've watched literally any of my videos, that's the most important thing in a game is the gameplay. Absolutely nothing else matters if the game is not fucking fun to play. And that is where I'm so torn on Max Payne 3, because is the game fun to play? Yes. But does it piss you off while you're playing it? Yes. And every time somebody asks me about this game, I just don't quite know where to put it. Max Payne 3 at its heart is just a shooter with a heavy emphasis on story, and the shooting in Max Payne 3 is some of the best shooting in any game, which you would have to come to expect from Rockstar after GTA 4 and Red Dead. Not really LA Noire, the shooting in that game was kind of ass, but Rockstar's shooting has always been some of the best. Well, now that's technically not true. The original GTA games, the 3D universe, their shooting was shit, but we'll talk about those games in another video. But you get my point. The recent games, Rockstar knew how to make games that were fun to shoot. And the shooting in Max Payne 3, still to this day, I go back and play it, and it's some of my favorite shooting. It might actually have my favorite shooting from any game. And one of the main selling points as far as mechanically for Max Payne and all of the Max Payne games is this thing called bullet time, where Max is basically just a fucking superhero and can slow down time like Quicksilver or the Flash and watch bullets whiz by his head and literally fucking cheat to kill these guys, because that's not fair. They did not sign up to fight some dude who was fighting in fucking slow motion. And if you play GTA 5, there's actually something kind of like this in that game too. Michael's ability is sort of like this. It's not as good, but I imagine that is where they got it from, was this game. Another thing that is actually super interesting is that the first two Max Payne games did not have cover systems. That was something new that Rockstar introduced into Max Payne 3, was cover-based shooting, whereas the first two were pure run and gun, which makes you have to ask, does that add to the game so that way you can try to do more tactical shit and take cover and think about how you approach situations more, or does that really just fuck up the flow from the first two games, considering how different it is, because the first two games weren't really cover-based shooters, even though some of them were fucking hard, so you were getting your ass beaten. You had to hide behind shit anyways, but I'm not really sure. It was definitely a trend at the time where everything was cover-based. All these games were getting cover-based systems and adding it where you could just hide behind a fucking stack of papers and get shot with RPGs and hey, you're good. Now, to me, I'm honestly pretty indifferent in this, because the cover system is fine and it definitely helps slow the game down a little bit. It's not something that necessarily bothers me, but I imagine for the hardcore Max Payne fans of Max Payne 1 and 2, that might be something that they're just not a fan of. But the biggest problem with this game to me, and while it's so fun with the shooting, and the shooting is just fucking amazing, it wants to constantly interrupt you from the best part of the game, which is the shooting, to drag you into cutscene after cutscene after fucking cutscene. There's just so many of them, and I'm gonna call them unskippable. Now, technically, they're not unskippable, because you can skip them, but you have to wait on them to load, and you have to wait on them to load for fucking ever. Fucking eons of time I've spent waiting on these cutscenes in Max Payne 3 to finish loading so that way I could skip them and go straight back into the game. Now, I understand what they were trying to do and make it more of a cinematic story, but really they just fuck up the pacing and it makes replaying the game almost impossible because going back after you've beaten it and playing through it and having to watch all them cutscenes again really pisses me off. I just want to run around and fucking shoot people. That's it. When the shooting is that good in a game, that's what I want to do. I want to run around and shoot people. I want to take a shotgun, put it straight to a dude's chest, and blow him apart. Is that really so much to ask? Now, the way they did the cutscenes is they kind of lead seamlessly in and out of gameplay. So, like, you would start shooting somebody, blah, 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 and it would move into a cutscene directly from where you're at. The cutscene would play, and then out of the cutscene directly from where he's at, it would move back into the gameplay, which sounds great in theory. It was a really cool concept, and it did work well. If you was watching the cutscenes, it worked. It did still take you out of the action when you was in the middle of fucking trying to blast through fools, but for the most part, it was seamless. But like I said, after you've already beaten it, going back and playing through it, this was at the cost of replayability. Because even in the middle of gunfights, it stops, it does a cutscene, you can't skip it, you have to watch through it, and then it puts you back into the game. This is personally my biggest problem with the game. My biggest issue with the entire game, because I just want to run around and shoot people. That's it. I know the story. Let me skip it. But before I talk about that for 2 hours, let's continue on past that shit. One thing that they added into this game that I have not seen in another game ever since, it has not happened, is the way that they did third-person shooting and the way that Max could always be able to, like, move his arms and bend his body like an Olympic gymnast to fucking shoot people in the face. So like I talked about earlier, you have the bullet time where you could slow down time, bullets whizzing by your head and all that, and you could shoot people in slow motion, and you also have shoot dodge, which is basically bullet time, except Max just dives. He can dive in any direction, and he'll hit the ground with a fucking thud, and I do not know how he doesn't knock the wind out of himself every time that he does it. And while you're in that dodge, it will do the bullet time slow-mo stuff. But what's really interesting out of this is when you hit the ground and you're laying on the ground, you're not completely screwed. He can lay there, he can lay on his back and look down the sights and blast people. He can shoot to the side of himself. He can literally point the gun back behind his head and start shooting at people that way. He has 360-degree motion in shooting people, which is something that they added that works so well and is so useful so often and has not been in another game since, at least to my knowledge. If it's in another game, leave it down below and tell me, because I don't think that it is. This feature is great. I love that they added this because it works amazing. And the way that the environment gets wrecked and the big set pieces that they have for this game do make for really satisfying and fun shootouts. Shooting in Max Payne 3 is some of the best shooting in any game, if they didn't just take you out of the action constantly with all them fucking cutscenes. The story of the first two Max Payne games were in New York City. They were dark, they were grimy, but that is not where Max Payne 3 goes. Max Payne 3 goes to the bright and sunny São Paulo, Brazil. Now, don't get it twisted, because it is bright and sunny, but this place is also still dangerous as fuck. I'm not gonna go too deep into the first two games, but Max has been through a lot of shit with his wife and daughter being killed, and in the Max Payne 3 game, this dude is completely broken and is just a fucking alcoholic and a massive pill addict. Now, Max has been through a lot, and the world of these games have always been dark, so it makes sense that it would be this kind of dark and gritty thing. But Max throughout the whole game is basically just depressed, and listening to him be depressed throughout this entire playthrough gets old so fucking fast.
I took a whole bottle of pills, and I downed every single one of them, because I'm just a worthless piece of shit. My wife and my kid died. Where's that gin? Nah, fuck you, Raul. I need more pills.
Like, dude, I'm so fucking sick of hearing about fucking Max's issues. You would think after all this time, he at least would have learned how to deal with it. Or if even they wanted to go this route where he was just completely broken, they still could have done that. But at least have some character progression, man, because by the whole game, he's just fucking addicted and annoying as hell to listen to. Like, I felt sorry for him in the first two games, and I don't feel sorry for him anymore because I'm just sick of it. Which is kind of an issue in a different way, because the first two games, the story was kind of driven by this, like, passion for vendetta, where you just had the same desire Max had to get back at these people and fuck them up for what they did to him and his family. But in this game, it's not really like that. All of that motivation is gone. Like, Max is not really doing this for any reason other than just being driven by his own ego and almost in a transactional sense, because he's just here to get paid. And so it just doesn't pack the same punch that the first two had. The first two, you wanted to fight with Max because you wanted the same shit that he wanted. But in this game, it's not really like that. That is gone. One of the positives, though, like I mentioned in the previous section about all the fucking cutscenes that they like to show you over and over and over again, they are laid out very nicely in almost like a comic book format. And I like the way that these were done. It's interesting, and I don't think I've seen it in another game since, or that I had seen it in a game up to that point. But they do kind of overdo it, and they do it all the time. The style is really cool, but if it had just been used a little bit more sparingly, I feel like it would have hit a lot harder. Now, I love the setting of the first two Max Payne games. They're both set in New York City, and I love New York City. Personally, I find New York City exciting in every game, and it's always interesting. It's just, I don't know, I have some weird obsession with it. But then moving to São Paulo, Brazil was risky as shit, but I actually respect it because it was a whole new flavor. And one thing that I thought was really cool was there was such a contrast between some of the places that you go to early on in these wealthier areas of Brazil down to the sketchy backstreet, low-income areas like the favelas. There was such a contrast, and you could really feel the difference in the way that those cities were ran and the way that those people were treated within them and the lives that those people led that you just don't quite get in a first world city like New York. And obviously with Rockstar Games' attention to detail, you know that they were going to make an absolutely beautiful game. And they did. The game looks great, the graphics are great, the environments are diverse, and it's much, much more cinematic than the first two games. The actual cutscenes and storytelling of the first two games were much more rudimentary, but Rockstar, doing their thing, managed to make Max Payne 3 infinitely more cinematic. Everything looks and feels higher quality, down to just textures, lighting, destruction within the environments, and most of it was really well done. Although there was a bit of a clash with the bright and sunny Brazil, especially like the nightclubs and shit like that, and all of the brighter, more upbeat looking areas contrasting with Max just being fucking depressed all the time. Like, I get it, but I feel like they should have started the game with that and then moved on. Because you walk into a place and you're like, wow, this is beautiful, and then cut to Max.
The sun was burning my skin. I wish I had another bottle of pills right about now.
Like, dog. Now, when this game came out, the people were torn. I had seen so many negative reviews and so many positive reviews, which I guess you could expect because of how different it was from the first two games and how beloved those first two games were. But this game also did have some issues, but it also did some things really fucking well. So I feel like nobody ever really knew how to feel about this game. The story itself was interesting enough, and it was cool the way that it was told. The gameplay and the gunplay is some of the best in any game, even today. You can go back and play this, preferably on PC, because the resolution on PS3 is awful. But on PC, the game still looks really good and plays really good. The shooting is still some of my favorite. Honestly, it's probably my favorite. You have Red Dead Redemption 2, which has some really good shooting, but Max Payne 3's just feels amazing. Which it should, because, I mean, that was the entire point of the game to exist, was Max is just a dude shooting people in the face constantly. The presentation is amazing. The voice acting is really good. And technically, it's a well-made game. But you're going to see a lot of people who have some serious mixed feelings about how big of a shift there was in the setting and the tone from that noir New York City to this dingy, bright, sunny São Paulo, Brazil. And with the first two games not having a cover system and the new one having one, with insane difficulty spikes here and there where the game just all of a sudden got hard as shit, and the dead multiplayer. The multiplayer at the time, it was okay, but it really wasn't super relevant. It was kind of just there to be there. It was kind of fun. I played it, but at this point, it's completely dead. So if you go back and get it, do not get it for the multiplayer because there is nothing there unless maybe you have some friends, but I don't even know if that works. Rockstar decided to take a completely different approach than Remedy Entertainment did for their first two games. And whether or not it paid off, I honestly can't even tell you. They decided to take it and put the Rockstar spin on it. Max is pretty annoying himself in the game, but it has some of the best gunplay in any game. And you can even see a lot of the elements that they created in Max Payne 3's shooting in the more modern games. If you go back and play like Grand Theft Auto 4, and then you go to Max Payne 3, and then you go from Max Payne to Red Dead and Grand Theft Auto 5, you'll see a lot of those elements are in Max Payne 3, and a lot of them were designed through Max Payne 3. And that's something most people probably don't even realize, is how heavily influenced in the shooting department those games were by Max Payne 3. I don't know if it's really called influence when it's literally made by the same company, but Max Payne 3 set the groundwork for a lot of that. And in my opinion, it's still better. There's a lot of mixed reception on Max Payne 3 even today, but my opinion, which is the only one that matters, is somewhere in the middle too, leaning more towards it being great versus away from being great, because the gameplay is just so good. good. The shooting is just absolutely incredible. If it wasn't for Max being an annoying bitch the whole time, and these cutscenes taking me out of the game over and over and over again when I just want to blast people in the face, then Max Payne 3 would maybe be the best shooter. Third person at least. But because of that, is it the best third person shooter? I don't know. It is still one of the best, and if you haven't played it before, your first playthrough will be great because the cutscene issue doesn't really bother you until after you've beaten it and want to play it again, which you will because the game isn't super long, but the shooting is just that fun. You're gonna want to go back through it, but when you do, it's gonna piss you off. I personally love Max Payne 3, but I can also see how some other people wouldn't. But if you guys enjoyed Max Payne 3 and you enjoyed the video, or if you didn't, leave it down in a comment below and let me know how you felt either way, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Peace.